Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, Art and Barron. You're ready to go. We are live on the internet and ready for you to start your meeting, sir.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the advisory committee. I know we're still a little bit differently. I appreciate everybody's patience, and I ask that everybody work with us in getting through this meeting this morning, or actually this afternoon. Before we get going, I'd like to take a moment of silence and honor the officers who lost their lives in the line of duty since the last meeting we had. Sergeant Damon Gutzwiller, Santa Cruz County Sheriff's Office. Thank you for that. Can we please have the roll call?
Banning,
Here.
Barron,
Here.
Bernard,
Here.
DiBasilio,
Here.
Honda, Oborn, Okashima,
I'm here. I can unmute.
Salazar,
Here.
Sandoval, Schmidt,
Here.
Waltz,
Here.
Webb, and Young.
Thank you for that. Mr. Loggins?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, welcome to the meeting. I'm Scott Loggins, one of the two assistant executive directors for the commission. I'm opposed. To my right, as if that makes a difference online, is my fellow assistant executive director, Maria Sandoval, as well as the executive director of Post, Manny Sandoval. Mr. Chair, I would like to add that the all right, there's an ongoing, that would be Manny Alvarez. That's a long-standing joke. Back onto business, I will add that the three members that are unable to attend, they did notify staff ahead of time that they could not make it for specifically to do with the issues of unrest throughout the state of California. And today happens to be the memorial service for Sergeant Gutzwiller. So they did notify us ahead of time. And I yield back to you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Loggins. I hope everyone had an opportunity to review the minutes. I wish I could pass them out. I hope all of you have it digitally. If you can take a moment to approve them. And I think if I can get a motion for approval, please.
Motion Bernard.
Second, Young.
Any announcements from the committee staff?
Mr. Chair, I think we need we have two motions. I think we need a vote to approve the summary and prior minutes.
I apologize about that. If we can please have a vote, anyone abstain, any nays? Okay, motion passes, thank you. Any announcements from the committee? If none standing, I'd like to take the opportunity to congratulate our fellow advisory member, Randy Waltz. I happen to notice that Mr. Waltz has a new uniform and has a lot of shiny stars. So congratulations, sir, on that.
Thank you.
Without ado then, if there's no comments, I'd like to move on to the review of the commission meeting agenda, the meat and potatoes of our meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, we received a request to have a report on every one of the voting items in the agenda, which will be heard by the commission tomorrow. So to start off with first, I will start off with the report on changes to Regulation 1070, which is minimum training standards for instructors of post-certified training. And I believe the person providing that particular report will be Cheryl Smith from the Post Basic Training Bureau.
The proposed changes to Commission Regulation 1070 would remove the requirement that instructors teaching in the basic courses that only teach slow-speed maneuvers attend the driver training instructor course. We currently require instructors to complete the driver awareness instructor course and the driver training instructor course. For those instructors only teaching slow-speed maneuvers, the driver training instructor course is not necessary. Does anybody have questions in regards to those proposed changes? That's it.
Thank you for that. I appreciate that.
Very well. Thank you very much. The next person I'm going to invite to the podium.
Mr. Loggins? If I can have a minute to get a motion, or at least not a motion, but get a consensus from the committee, make sure that they're all for it, and so I can pass the information along to the commission tomorrow. Committee, again, I ask on every one of these items, I'm going to quickly ask any comments, concerns, anything we need to share with the commission, please. With that, any comments? Concerns? Anything I should be passing on? Do we all agree that it's a good idea?
Banning?
Yes, sir.
I'm just concerned if, how often would say an instructor from a low speed or say the low speed maneuvers get called up because of a lack of staffing, maybe on the other end where they're doing pursuit driving or some other, some of the accident simulators, those types of things. How would we ensure that that wouldn't, I mean, I'm not saying it wouldn't happen. What is the downside of having them both be certified or going to both so they could kind of step in?
So currently we run a modular academy, which would be a 3-2-1. And if you're running a module 3, we're currently requiring you to take both the driver training instructor course and the driver awareness course, which is making it difficult for the module 3 presenters. Mostly academies are going through both of them anyways if they're running a 1. So if you're running a 3, you're not doing any high speed at all.
Right. Okay. Got it. All right. Thank you.
So committee, with that, I'm going to ask from now on to make it simple. If we get a thumbs up or a thumbs down, that way we can move forward easily with that. So everybody thumbs up or thumbs down on this one. I appreciate that. Thank you. Mr. Loggins?
Very well. Thank you. And thank you for your patience. I am going to go backwards one because the initial voting item was changed from a report to an actual voting item. So I'm going to invite law enforcement consultant Raymond Nana-Diego to come to the podium. And this will be report number D as in David, which is a report on the proposed changes to training and testing specifications and use of the carotid restraint control hold.
Thank you very much. The carotid restraint control hold is taught in Learning Domain 33, Arrest and Control, as a component of the regular basic course. The student workbook states on page 4-3 that, quote, "The carotid restraint control hold is a physical technique where a peace officer applies continuing compression on the carotid arteries on both sides of the neck with no effect on the respiratory structures of the throat in order to gain control of resisting persons," end quote. Post presenters only provide the training curriculum for this procedure. Authority to use the procedure in the field is exclusively that of the individual agency based on local jurisdiction, legal counsel and review, executive direction, and as defined in its agency-specific use of force policies. The minimum instructional hours for Learning Domain 33, Arrest and Control, is 60 hours, which includes the training of the carotid restraint control hold. Instructors teaching arrest and control techniques are required to complete a post-certified instructor course or an equivalency pursuant to Regulation 1070 prior to teaching. In the regular basic course, students are taught the proper technique and application, the advantages and risks involved, the follow-up procedures after application of the technique, and safety precautions. The training includes knowing the factors which cause unconsciousness and physiological responses when a carotid restraint control hold is applied. The student must understand the potential effects associated with the improper application and procedures for handling a person after a carotid restraint control hold has been applied. Additionally, the student is taught the basic structures of the human neck, which can be affected by the application of the carotid restraint control hold. Each student is then tested on the technique. The student must demonstrate the following performance dimensions: safety, awareness, balance, control, controlling force, proper techniques, verbal commands and instructions, and first aid assessments. The workbook states on page 4-8 that, quote, "The average person may be rendered unconscious within a matter of seconds after the carotid restraint control hold is properly applied. As soon as the hold has attained the desired effect, or if the person submits to peace officer control prior to being rendered unconscious, the hold should be released and the peace officer should continue controlling the person with the application of a different control hold technique," end quote. The carotid restraint control hold can be an effective, less lethal restraint option to protect the peace officer and the resisting persons when properly applied. Agencies and departments have established policies regarding justification for use of the carotid restraint control hold and the follow-up steps required when the hold is applied to a person. Given the current climate regarding law enforcement training and tactics, Post staff recommends the removal of the training in the use of the carotid restraint control hold from the basic course curriculum pursuant to the rulemaking process and the Office of Administrative Law.
Mr. Chair, this is Manny Alvarez. If I could add a couple of comments on top of what Raymond's said, if I may.
Yes, please.
Well, thank you, sir. So as many of you know, we had a commission meeting in February, and the commission asked us to put on a presentation on the carotid restraint back in February, based on some concerns from public members who spoke to the commission. Obviously, with everything that's happened in Minneapolis and the killing of Mr. George Floyd, we had been monitoring as much as we could the outcry by the public, the concern by the public for public safety. There was a lot of discussion about legislation, both on the state and federal side. A lot of questions from legislators in California about the use of the carotid. The governor has addressed the use of the carotid as well. So out of those concerns for obviously public safety, for safety of the public, on top of the feedback that we've been getting, that I'm sure all of us have seen all over the news, happening across the country, let alone across the world in regards to carotid restraint. We made a decision to put it on for the commission to make a decision. So we modified the commission agenda item for a vote to remove it, and that is what we are recommending based on the criteria that I just spoke to. So I just wanted to clarify that point. And I'll say the same thing tomorrow.
Thank you, Mr. Alvarez. Committee, questions, comments, concerns, anything for the executive director?
Sheriff DiBasilio here. I have a couple of questions and concerns. First, coming from a rural county standpoint, my concern is I have a deputy that is out in the middle of nowhere, and he gets to a point to where he doesn't have a choice to control somebody and has to use this carotid. I think we checked our statistics, and in almost 20 years that I've been here, we've actually only used it twice. It was successful. But I know the Assembly Bill 1196 is trying to basically make it illegal to use. I'm concerned that, and this is a personal opinion that I have, that we're jumping the gun on this because the incident with Mr. Floyd was not a carotid. That was a knee that was put on the neck. He was there for over 8.5 minutes. And we know that if the carotid hold is used correctly, and I think the gentleman that spoke, that read about the training, it is a less lethal option, meaning that is just that, it is less lethal. I would be curious to see what the statistics show on how many times it has become a lethal option. What are the parameters behind it being a lethal option? Because it is not trained or taught that way. I think we're taking something out of the toolbox for a lot of us rural sheriffs to protect our staff. Again, what happened to Mr. Floyd was tragic, but that was not a carotid hold. I understand Post's stance on this, giving the direction from the governor. But I just want to voice my opinion. I think that it is a mistake to remove something out of the toolbox that, when used properly, like any other impact weapon or option that we have in our toolbox, that we're taking away something that could potentially cause more injury and realistically more shootings if a carotid is not being able to be utilized. It could cause somebody to have to go to a firearm at a sooner point. So I just would like to voice my concerns. Thank you.
Thank you for those comments. Any other comments?
Yeah, Schmidt here. I'm going to echo what the sheriff said. We had a discussion on this at our PORAC board meeting on Monday, and it was brought up specifically by the LA airport representative that, you know, when they have to take people off of an airplane that won't, you know, that don't want to deboard, this is an option that they don't have the ability to use OC. They're very close quarters with even baton. And if it gets to a level of, like the sheriff said, less lethal force, and you have an actively aggressive, I guess, passenger, how do we, you know, if we take this tool out of the toolbox, then we're limiting ourselves again. I echo everything the sheriff said as far as Mr. Floyd. That was not a carotid. But I do have a question on this. Is this just removing it from the police academy training, or can this be eligible for advanced officer training in different agencies? I guess that's more of a question for the presenter.
So
Thank
thi-
you for the comments, Mr. Alvarez or Mr. Loggins.
Okay, if I may, Mr. Chair, would you like to address it, Scott, or would you like me to? Go ahead, you go.
I'll go ahead and start off. This is, first of all, Mr. Schmidt and Sheriff DeBasile, we're very mindful of the concerns of law enforcement. From Post perspective, we take guidance from the commission. And of course, you heard the governor's concerns. For the time being, we've taken it out of the in-service courses. And I think the best way to characterize it is we're utilizing this as an opportunity to maybe take a pause or a timeout so that the fact patterns of the utilization of that technique can be reviewed if that's the direction of the commission. So we are mindful of the concerns of law enforcement. We're also concerned about the global impact and the nationwide impact and the optics that are they're looking to Post to take for guidance on this issue. So I would characterize it more as an opportunity to make a timeout, to maybe pause the clock, so to speak, so that either further research can be done. If that's the direction the commission wants to go, that can be done. And also determining on what position the legislature and their counterparts across the nation give us with respect to that particular topic.
And if I may add, Mr. Chair, on top of what Scott mentioned. So the answer is this removes it from the basic academy. The only requirement for carotid restraint by Post is in the basic academy. So this would remove that if the commission decides to do that. In terms of in-service training, that is not a requirement for arrest and control, for perishable skills. It doesn't appear anywhere within Post. However, there are agencies that opt to provide carotid restraint training as part of perishable skills or under arrest and control. We've decided internally, based on everything that we've seen, that we are not going to certify that type of training at this point. So we have asked those agencies that do it, with Post certification to stop. It makes very little sense if we are going to ask that it be removed from the academy instruction to then do it on the backside for in-service training. The two should marry up perfectly. Whether right or wrong, whether the commission decides to take it out or not, take it, or to leave it. I presume if the commission says, hey, leave it, then we'll go back and address it or assess the situation under the in-service aspect of it. But we do have discretion for in-service courses if it's not a mandate as to whether we're going to certify the training or not. And we make those decisions very regularly. I'll just give you a couple of just examples. If there's something that somebody wants to do on EVOC that we don't consider is safe or is necessary, or that we don't want to certify, we don't. As we spoke in the last couple of weeks, we had a course that one agency wanted to provide instruction, rightful instruction, to certain types of officers that install pole cameras. And the training was how to go up the pole, how to install the camera, where to install it. We're not experts in that. So we said, look, you can do it, but we don't want to certify that, not because it's not righteous, but because we don't have that expertise. Then we have courses, the biggest one is from a safety standpoint, or firearms courses, where we see that there's not enough safety officers, or we don't feel that there's enough personnel, or it's not being done in a safe fashion. We automatically say, we're not going to certify it unless you make modifications. So we do already use that discretion for in-service courses. And based on the posture that we've taken with the academy, we assume that we should do the same thing for the in-service courses. And I hope that answers the question.
Mr. Chair, if I may add, there is nothing that precludes an agency from training the carotid outside of the post spectrum. This is simply addressing those courses that post certify. There's a wealth of training out there available throughout the entirety of the state that can be done outside of post certification.
Sheriff DiBasilio, I have a question. Mr. Alvarez, you made the comment that if the commission decides to go ahead and remove the training from the academies, then you probably will not be continuing with certifications for in-service instructors. That being said, what does that do for the people that have already had the in-service training through Post and have been certified by Post? That, because I believe, and I'm trying to remember, I just talked to my instructor the other day, and I thought that he was good for 3 years is what the certificate was good for. He's only a year into it. Does that mean that I lose that certification for the next 2 years? And do I have to get him recertified somewhere else? Does it open my department up to a liability if Post says we're not training it anymore, all certificates are null and void, and for some reason one of my guys uses it because it's still in my policy, again, because of the ruralness of my county? So what does that do to me on a liability side?
So the certification, that 3-year certification is for arrest and control in general, not necessarily for the carotid restraint. They're certified to teach arrest and control. And that will not obviously go away.
Okay. But part of that arrest and control is the carotid not taught at that time? So is that not part of the certification?
Hi, Sheriff. This is Maria Sandoval. I'm one of the other assistant executive directors. What Post is doing is not saying that you cannot teach that. That portion of the course would not be certified by Post. We are not saying that you cannot use this technique in the field if that is what you as a sheriff decide for your region. That is something that is a decision that is with each agency. This is only in regards to if it is attached onto a perishable skills, arrest and control, that portion of that will not be certified by Post. But if you want to continue using that in the field, in your region, that's up to you.
Okay. So I'm still a little confused about the arrest and control techniques that were taught originally and the carotid being part of that through Post. So you're basically stating that because the carotid is not going to be allowed anymore, that it's null and void from the training that my people got at Post.
Post is not saying that you are not allowed to do that technique.
No, I got that. I got that.
Okay.
I'm looking, didn't mean to interrupt you. I'm looking at the civil liability side of it now because Post is saying we're not training it anymore. We're not certifying it anymore. And I know it's going to be a liability on my side if we end up continuing to train it. And again, if Assembly Bill 1196 comes into play, it may not be an option at all. So, but thank you. I appreciate your input.
Sheriff, this is Jamie Young, and I'm wondering whether the question is by eliminating it from the academy curriculum, is it then a de facto non-standard? So the standard is now that it's not being taught, so therefore there's no standard any longer? Is that maybe the question?
No, I don't know if that's because it's not a standard anymore. I mean, we can train any way we want. And I understand that. SAPs have been outdated for many, many years, but if we wanted to train with a SAP and we wanted to certify our people with a SAP, we could do that. We don't have to have Post permission to do that. It's just something that they're not going to certify. We talk about impact weapons. An impact weapon could be a flashlight because that's all I have available to me. It could be a chair if that's all I have available to me. And again, it all kind of boils down to the totality of the circumstances. I'm just trying to, in my mind, get around what the civil liabilities are going to be when Post says we're not going to, or if Post says we're not going to train the carotid anymore because it's causing deaths. Again, I go back to what I stated very originally is I would be curious to see how many people have actually died from a carotid, because what happened to Mr. Floyd was not a carotid. And I think this is a knee-jerk reaction by our governor and a lot of other folks. And I have a problem with them taking something out of our toolbox that, again, what is stated in Post curriculum, that it is a non-lethal, less lethal option. And we're taking something away because of what one cop did that was absolutely wrong. I just a little bothered by the knee-jerk reaction. I'm sorry. Thank you.
So if I may, Mr. Chair, and I don't want to confuse it or cause additional questions, I completely agree with Sheriff DiBasilio in terms of the death of Mr. Floyd. That was not the carotid, and we have corrected members of the media or those that have posted information from the media or the blogs that indicate that that was the carotid restraint. It was not. We all know that that was not, and we don't train or teach anything like what happened in Minneapolis. I venture to say there's no law enforcement agency that trains to do that, I venture to say. So removing it from the academy is obviously there's some liability questions that we can't answer in regards to the sheriff's questions, but we provide carotid training for certain individuals that go through, not certain, but 100% of the individuals that go through the basic academy right now. They get 100% of them receive carotid restraint training. Some of them land at departments where it's not used. It's forbidden, so to speak, in policy. It's not permitted to be used. So they're getting the training, but they're not entitled to use it by policy. I understand there's going to be people out there that have received carotid restraint control hold training. Most of them have, right? Some of the people on the screen, some of us have. We're just saying we're asking the commission to consider not pursuing it any further based on everything that we're hearing. So I can't answer all of the sheriff's questions. There's definitely some unknowns and some decisions that need to be made agency by agency. Our concern right now is just getting the feedback, which has been tremendous, as you all have seen from the public about the use of it, where it all lands with assembly bills and HR bills and the demands of the public or the requests by the public. is an unknown, right? We see some departments that have completely gone away from it. Some say you can use it as a deadly force option. We teach it as a control hold, not as a deadly force option. And right now, I think what we're suggesting is that we should remove it at least for now, based on everything we're seeing. And again, that'll be up to the commission tomorrow. I appreciate the comments because I suspect there's going to be a ton of comments and a ton of feedback tomorrow. And I'm sure that there's members of the public and legislators that are also going to hear this. So I think it's important for them to hear the concerns on both sides from a law enforcement perspective, which is what we've heard a couple of comments already. I think it's important that come out. So I would definitely speak up during this meeting. I know the commissioners are listening, and I'm sure they're going to have a spirited conversation tomorrow.
If I could just comment too, and I kind of echo the comments of both the sheriff and Eric. And I appreciate the presentation from staff and understand and think it's probably good to pause and at least do some additional research, but also caution on making permanent decisions without having that information. And looking at it from a bigger perspective, while it's certainly an agency could still continue to have it in their policy or train it, aside from what Post trains, we give a great deal of weight to what Post does certify in their training. And I think especially when you look at the use of force training that from SB 230 that Post is also working on. When you put it in that perspective, I think that gives it even greater weight to what Post's ultimate decision is on the training of the carotid. It is something that's used rarely, but it can be an effective tool if used appropriately and trained appropriately. And I think that's part of it. Do you eliminate it, or do we do a better job at training it? I think you mentioned it's taught to 100% of those who attend the basic academies. Then from there, there's a question as to how frequently it's trained beyond that. And should it be something that's trained better in perishable skills or addressed so that when it is used, it's used appropriately and the appropriate steps are taken and good policies. But my concern is if Post doesn't do it, then that does leave us in a position where it takes away a potentially effective tool. Even though we could leave it in policy, there's a lot of weight to that, especially with the SB 230 training that you are working on.
Thank you for those comments. Any other comments?
I have a brief comment. Definitely not in disagreement with any of the previous things that have been said, but it seems that maybe the train has left the station on this just because of lack of education of the public and even some within our profession who equate the carotid restraint with the chokehold, and those terms are used interchangeably even among some law enforcement professionals. I think that kind of lended to some of this knee-jerk response. That's the way I feel that it is. But I think it's really important to delineate between those two, because our training previously specifically said that this has no effect on the respiratory structures. And to equate the two, I think, is part of the problem, and education of the delineation between the two is going to be important if this is reintroduced to some level in the future.
Thank you, sir. Any other comments? So overall, I'm hearing, and please correct me, committee, as I may be misspeaking at this point, training, research on this matter, looking into it a little bit further rather than just jumping and eliminating the tool, as the sheriff said, from our toolbox. Is that the comment we want to share with the commission, or is there something other than that we want to share with the commission?
Sheriff DiBasilio again, I think that would be my recommendation, that there's more research done. Again, I've got to go back to it, be curious to see how many people have actually died from the carotid being applied and what the parameters were. Was it held too long? Was it actually not a carotid? Did it end up being a chokehold? I think there's a lot a lot of unanswered questions that need to be answered. So that would be my recommendation, what you just said. Yes, thank you.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Mr. Banner.
Yeah, I tend to agree with everything I've heard so far. What's the, maybe we could ask that the commission would actually table it, ask for maybe a staff report. I hate to ask more of the staff than already has been happening, especially working remotely so much. But if we give this thing a 30-day cool down, we might have more success than we would probably tomorrow. Not to say that the commission would not make logical decisions, but it's going to be pretty rough, I think, for them to, I think that at least if they table the item, it gives them a way out versus a thumbs up or a thumbs down right now. Because if I wouldn't, just given the climate, I wouldn't see the commission actually voting to, I think that they would vote to remove that completely right now. Tomorrow, 30 days, maybe a little bit more information would be my suggestion. See what we can come up with. It's a hot button right now. I think trying to get this thing going, it's like shoveling sand uphill. I just don't think, I think we're going to lose the opportunity if we can't get them to table it.
Thank you for that comment. Any last comments? Anyone else?
Yeah, this is Ryan Okashima from CHP. I agree with everything that's been said. However, we've got this assembly bill now in the works. And then what's the time frame on that? If they rush that bill through, does that then trump any decision out of the commission?
Mr. Alvarez, Scott?
Mr. Chair and Mr. Okashima, I can answer that because there is precedent. If there is any training that POST provides, whether it's a regulatory matter or a non-regulatory matter, precedent is that if there is legislation that prohibits it or modifies it, by default, we always yield to whatever the law of that day is. So there may be a technical issue where a technique could be in the training and testing specifications, and it still remains in the training and testing specifications because it has been formally removed through the Office of Administrative Law process. But we always go with whatever the letter of the law is at that particular time. So short answer is we would yield to whatever the law is that particular day.
And if I may add to that, Mr. Chair, we haven't seen the language in the bill yet. It hasn't been released yet, so we don't know what it's going to say or what it says. We anticipate that obviously that it's going to remove the ability for law enforcement to use it in some capacity, either entirely. We're just not sure at this point, but yeah, as Scott mentioned, obviously that will trump anything the commission does, as well as the federal legislation that's also going through. I think that will trump what the commission likely decides.
Thank you. One last time, any additional comments before we move on from this item? All right, thank you very much.
Very well, thank you, Mr. Chair. The next person I will invite to the podium is Staff Services Manager Anita Fenner from the Basic Training Bureau. And she's going to provide a report on the proposed changes to the training and testing specifications for the Peace Officer Basic Course LD20.
Good afternoon. With the recent legislative changes and the addition of de-escalation to Learning Domain 20, use of force de-escalation, POST recognized the need for students to be provided the option to utilize any non-deadly force options available during the scenario testing process. Currently, POST requires students to be tested on baton and control holds, but does not allow for the testing of other non-deadly force options to include de-escalation. There are a range of non-deadly force options available to peace officers in addition to impact weapons and control holds, such as chemical agents, electronic weapons, use of de-escalation techniques, etc. POST is proposing to merge the existing baton and control hold scenario testing requirements into one non-deadly force test option. The proposed changes to training and testing specifications the proposed changes to the training testing specifications will eliminate the restriction of only two non-deadly force options and allow presenters the opportunity to evaluate students on any non-deadly force option available to them, to include the use of de-escalation techniques when appropriate. The proposed changes are consistent with the priorities of the legislature for de-escalation and law enforcement training. Thank you.
Thank you. Committee, any comments, questions, or concerns? Can I get a thumbs up or a thumbs down on this matter, please? Thank you very much. I appreciate that report.
Very well. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Ms. Fenner. Next person I will invite to the podium will be Staff Services Manager Jennifer Hardesty from the Basic Training Bureau as well. She is going to provide a report on the changes to the basic course certification process.
Good afternoon. I'm here to talk about the basic course certification process. Back in January or July of 2018, we took a proposition or a request to the commission to update the basic course certification process and to test it out through a pilot process. That pilot process included an attestation form that the presenter would submit to post during the initial certification process. It would also require that they submit their working schedule to post for us to review, excuse me, to ensure that all required content was presented to each class. That pilot process has been successful. So what we would like to do is move forward, excuse me, with implementing those changes. In addition to the attestation, we would eliminate the expanded course outline on the front end of the certification process unless the presenter is going to present any content that is beyond post-required content and what's required in the training and testing specifications. We would ask that they submit their working schedule along with their roster entry at the end of the course, which would allow post staff to review that content and determine if all required training specs and certification objectives were taught to that presentation of the course. Currently, when they certify a course, we get all of those documents on the front end. Sometimes it'll be the same documents for the entire fiscal year unless post requires a change to the training specs. This new process would allow us to look at a schedule for each presentation of the course rather than just looking at what they're proposing doing. We've found issues in the past during certification reviews where content has been missed. And a lot of times it's difficult years down the road to try to go back and get those students caught up with that material. This would allow us to do that in a much more timely fashion. In addition to changes to the certification process, we also are looking to add a requirement on scenario managers and scenario evaluators that they have full-time law enforcement experience and are in possession of a basic certificate. We've had instances where presenters might use a level 2 reserve who's completed only the module 2 training course, and they've never actually gone through scenario testing themselves because they've never gone to that module 1 or regular basic course level. Yet they're evaluating students' performance on scenario tests in a regular basic course. We also have seen instances where individuals that are evaluating have moved from agency to agency and never completed a probationary period. So implementing that requirement for the basic certificate would help to correct that deficiency as well. And we just see it as a way to further validate and ensure consistency and accurate evaluation of that scenario testing process for those students. Any questions for me?
I have a question.
Oh,
Schmidt, on the scenario manager and evaluators, that doesn't eliminate anybody that's retired law enforcement that comes back to be an evaluator or a manager at one of the police academies, correct?
Correct, because they would
Okay.
be in possession of
They
that.
would be in possession of the basic. Okay,
Yes.
that's all. Thank you.
The one thing I forgot to mention is, in addition to the changes to the certification process, we also are proposing moving the basic certification regulations out of 1052 and moving them to 9. Currently, they're so far down in the regulation text that they're very difficult for presenters to find. And a lot of times the requirements for basic courses get confused with requirements for certification of all other post-certified courses. So to simplify that process, we'd like to create a new regulatory section 1059 that will be specific to the basic course certification process.
All right, Tamara, I have one quick question for you. You said the ECO at the front end will be eliminated, so we're giving you the ECOs at the end with the hourly and the roster?
So POST provides for all the basic courses, the training and testing specifications. That's what's been determined has to be presented in that basic course. The ECO essentially is just a repeat of the training and testing specs, but it's presented to POST in a different format. So what we're looking at is the attestation will require the presenter to sign stating that they're going to present the training and testing specifications that are in place at the time of presentation of their course. And then they will submit an ECO to us for any content that they might present outside of the training and testing specification requirements. So for example, if they throw in a Spanish class, or if they want to add a learning activity to a post-required domain that's above and beyond what POST requires, they would have to put that into an expanded course outline and submit it for a review.
Thank you for that.
Sure.
Committee, any questions or comments? Any concerns? Can I get a thumbs up on agreeing or thumbs down? Thank you, everybody.
Thank you
very
for
much for
your
that
time.
presentation.
Very well. Thank you very much, Jennifer. The next item is item H, report on restructuring of the advisory committee, and I will be providing that report. Beginning in October 2018, the commission started endeavor to look at the composition and the performance of the advisory committee. The specific goals were determined, its efficacy, how it best serves law enforcement, and how it best serves the needs of the commission. Specifically, as a sounding board for law enforcement and the community at large, the commission relies on your expertise to provide them guidance on what's going on, what the proverbial heartbeat of the entirety of the state is at any given time. It's been addressed at several recent commission meetings, and at the last February commission, the commissioners took a detailed review of it and made some specific recommendations which are codified within this particular agenda. Some of the highlights of it are it is designed so that it represents three major groups. There's representation from the professional organizations, representation from labor organizations, and then representation from what we best describe as the proverbial boots on the ground, which is specifically line level staff that are currently working so that the commission has an opportunity to find out what's going on in all four corners of the states. The commission also gave us a direction to draft a diversity statement to reflect the commission and staff's goals to make sure that there's a fair and equitable representation, not only of representation of perspective, but diversity that represents all members of law enforcement that serve throughout the state of California, as well as the citizens and communities they serve. And there's specific provisions in it that give the chair some emergency regulatory authority or emergency procedural authority if there's a question as to exactly what needs to be done with respect to the rules and protocols. And regarding that, whatever the commission decides, it will not be codified in regulation. So it will not be tied up in any Office of Administrative Law process. Rather, it will be codified in what we call a commission manual, which is basically a collection of landmark decisions made by the commission that give further direction. Since you as a group, the advisory committee serves exclusively at the pleasure of the commission, does not require any formalized regulatory change. There is one specific task that Commissioner Bowie asked us to do. We were unable to do. She and the commission asked that the staff develop some sort of survey mechanism to survey law enforcement officers who want to voluntarily provide input anonymously as far as the direction of law enforcement. Post staff tabled that because of the COVID emergency tied up other resources as well. So with that, Mr. Chair, I will yield to you and your counterparts for any guidance and input you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Loggins. Committee, any comments? Unfortunately, I was not present in February's meeting due to some training issues going on in Orange County for us. But I want to hear from the committee and their comments on what they think and what they heard and the changes that they're being proposed to.
Jason Salazar, I agree with the report and agree with the recommendations that were made. And so I don't have any issues with what has been presented here. I think it's a good approach.
Thank you, sir. Any other comments?
Jamie Young, I also agree with the report and the approach. I do request, though, that the titles perhaps might change. So on the header of all of the associations, perhaps maybe it could be professional groups or professional organizations. That would allow then the dispatch group to move up to that particular area and then allow public members to be separate if that distinction needs to be made. And that's all I have.
Thank you. Anybody else? Hearing none, I'm going to make one comment. I know I've harped on this before in the past, and I apologize. Like Ms. Young, I'm going to bring the comment up that diversity should apply in law enforcement throughout. And sometimes we forget that the deputy coroner as being part of law enforcement and not having a coroner's kind of a seat, if you will, in that diversity would be doing injustice at this point. I think one of the things I've learned being part of this committee past few years is that it brings an opportunity to voice the needs of the coroner, which are often forgotten. They are sworn peace officers, is their guiding partner. And so I would hope that as part of diversity, they would not be forgotten on that table. Thank you. Any other comments? I say, Mr. Schmidt.
No, nothing. Thank you.
All right, I heard positive remarks. Can I get a thumbs up or a thumbs down on that one? Okay, thank you. Mr. Loggins?
Very well, thank you, Mr. Chair. The next people I'm going to invite up is Bureau Chief Drew Wyant and Law Enforcement Consultant Brad Newmeyer. And they're going to provide a report on changes to Regulation 1053, which addresses self-paced training in course certification.
Good afternoon, Commission. The changes to Regulation 1053 requirements for self-paced training course certification. The change can be found in the opening paragraph of the regulation where a sentence has been added. Currently, there's no codified minimum hourly standard for self-paced training courses. This section simply states that certified courses may be approved in hourly increments of at least 1 hour or more. And that's the change to Regulation 1053.
Thank you, sir. Any comments or questions on that?
Mr. Chair, if I may, it sounds like everybody's going to be in agreement, but if I could throw in my 2 cents on that. So we have always kind of struggled with that inside of POST because it doesn't articulate inside of the regulation what self-paced training should be. For standalone in-class courses, it's 2 hours or more. So we've stuck to that model with a lot of the self-paced courses. Well, it's policies silent in terms of online courses, so we're just going to make them 2 hours or adhere to that. We want to codify it, basically saying they can be done in less than 2 hours. There's a lot of things that happen in an online environment that aren't required, that are done inside a classroom, like introductions and everybody introducing themselves, which add up to that 2 hours. So we thought 1 hour would be reasonable.
Thank you, sir. Any comments with that? Excellent. If I can get a thumbs up, thumbs down, vote on that one. Thank you, committee. Mr. Loggins?
Thank you. I will request Bureau Chief Wyatt to remain in the hotspot. And next, he's going to provide a report on changes to Regulation 1005 regarding minimum standards for training.
Thank you, Scott. Changes to Regulation 1005, minimum standards for training. The added section to 1005D or parent D3C basically allows the post executive director or designee the discretion to identify a post-developed informational video of high priority or urgency and grant CPT credit to view the video. And informational videos are not courses, however, but if it's a high priority, that's kind of what the purpose of. An example of one that might have applied in the past is our AB 392 video currently on the Post Learning Portal.
Thank you for that report. Committee, any comments or questions? Hearing none, I'm going to ask for a vote. Thumbs up, thumbs down on this one. Thank you, everybody. Mr. Loggins?
Thank you. Thank you, Drew. Next person I'm going to invite to the podium is Staff Services Manager Michelle Weiler, or might I say Dr. Weiler, from the Training Delivery and Compliance Bureau. She's actually going to provide the next 3 presentations. The first one is item K, which is a report on request to amend Regulation 1054, which is discussing an edit to remove the tuition-based language from the Regulatory Act. And it looks like we have Bureau Chief Ralph Brown as well. Michelle?
Good morning, or afternoon. Oh, the day's gone by. So in working with our presenters in determining appropriate reimbursement plans for their courses, we discovered an inconsistency. We've always held a standard that the reimbursement plans apply to all courses across the board, regardless of whether or not a tuition applied or was being charged to the attendees. However, Regulation 1054 uses the term tuition-based course, and that's led to some confusion, not only amongst some of our newer presenters, but some of our newer consultants. So we wanted to just clarify that language to remove tuition-based course and just replace it with a post-certified course to make it more clear and easier for us to apply our reimbursement plans to all courses.
Thank you for that report. Committee, any questions, comments? Hearing none. Can I get a vote? Thumbs up, thumbs down? Thank you, everybody. Mr. Loggins?
Very well. Thank you, Michelle. Now, if you could provide us a report on the amended regulation of 1052 regarding instructors and post-certified courses.
Okay, again, this is another amendment to clarify some actually non-existent language. It's been common practice that you cannot be both an instructor and a student in a course. However, recently we've come across a few courses where rosters are being submitted and the presenters are having difficulty because they have an instructor who's instructing for a very small portion of a longer course, so for example, a 40-hour course where an instructor is present to teach maybe a 2-hour module of instruction. And then they turn around and they are a student for the remaining 38 hours of the course. And it kind of calls into question, what is their subject matter expertise to be a student, to be an instructor in this course if they need to attend some portion of that course. At the same time, we have an issue technologically in terms of the database, the electronic data interchange doesn't allow us to accept somebody to be both a student and an instructor. So rather than causing presenters to falsify documentation to be able to enroll somebody as a student or list them as an instructor, to be clear that you cannot be both would remove both concerns.
Thank you for that report. Committee, any questions? Comments? Thank you for that. Hearing none, can I get a vote? Thumbs up, thumbs down? Oh, Mr. Benning, am I seeing a thumbs down? Okay. Thank you, Mr. August.
Very well. Michelle, last one. She's going to provide a report on a request to amend Regulation 1056 to address annual course recertification.
Yeah, so we're going to ask the commission to allow us to amend Regulation 1056 to cover both things. One is that in 2007, post transition to using the electronic data, was that less feedback? We transitioned to the electronic data interchange to process course certification, course modification, and recertification. Currently, the language still refers to a paper certification package. So part of this amendment is to clean up that language and bring it current to our current practices of using the EDI. The other proposed amendment is to change the course recertification process. Currently, the EDI automatically recertifies courses every fiscal year. What we would like to propose is to rewrite the code for EDI to do a modification. So basically, we would force the courses into modification every fiscal year, which would then cause presenters and post staff to review course content to ensure relevance, best practices, as well as instructor expertise, among other things. We would not force all courses into modification for recertification at one time. It would happen basically on a biannual basis. So if a course was originally certified in an odd year, it would be put into modification for review and recertification in odd years. And the same would happen for courses that were first certified in even years. They would go into a modification recertification process in even years.
Thank you for that report. Any questions or comments? Concerns? I have one question, if you may. Would there be a downtime then for a presenter to be able to put on a course after it does go into modification? And I'm using that as an example. For example, we have the basic corners course that needs to be recertified again for me to put it on in August. And so more or less July 1st, it will be recertified so I can advertise it and get rosters going for us to fill the class. With that in mind, at the Sheriff's Department, will that course go into modification, and do we have a downtime for something like that so we can plan ahead? Would that be an issue?
So the short answer is it depends. Similar to the way right now you would get kind of a warning before courses become inactive, and that every 2-year review process, we would put out messages on the post website or through the post pass advising presenters to review any courses that were certified in the odd year, the even year, whichever year we're in, ahead of that July 1st date. The review and recertification process, in theory, would be much easier if the course had recently been modified or reviewed. So you just, as a presenter, would go in, take a look at your course, make sure everything is still current, contact your regional consultant, submit the course, and they would review it, and then it would be active again for you to advertise and present. If the course needed a little more work, so one of the reasons that this has come to light is when we are looking at courses and looking for expanded course outlines in the EDI to compare or to see what's, what an outline may look like, we have found that some of the courses that were migrated from paper course certification back in 2007 to EDI, their expanded course outlines did not migrate. And that indicates to us that they have just been automatically recertified every year without any review. So in theory, we might have some courses out there that are 10 plus years old. While the presenter may have updated the content, they have not actually done so in EDI. And so we do not have current content. We don't even have the ability to review the expanded course outline without asking the agency to resubmit it to us. So in that case, there would be a lot of work to be done for the presenter in order to get that course moving forward and presentable. So that's kind of where my "it depends" answer runs the range. It would behoove presenters to review their courses more regularly and keep them updated more regularly. And in that case, they would expedite this process.
And if I may add to that, Mr. Chair,
Yes,
if
please.
my understanding is correct, if it is in modification, if it is technically in modification, the course cannot be presented. Is that correct, Michelle?
Correct, as long as a presentation has not been pulled prior to modification.
Okay, right. So while it's in modification, it shouldn't be presented. We recognize this is going to be more laborious on the field because there are 4,300 or so courses out there. But this will also ensure that we review them regularly. Every course will be reviewed every 2 years by the presenter and a quick review by post. The review should be very, very quick and easy, hopefully, unless there's major changes in the law. But it will require a review, and preferably they won't be presenting it during a modification period.
Correct. Ideally, if you are evaluating your courses on a regular basis, it won't be quite so burdensome. It may be burdensome at the onset for some agencies or presenters who have not reviewed their courses in some time. But if you're doing it on a regular basis, it should be a pretty smooth process where the course goes into modification, your regional consultant reviews and approves it, and it's recertified and active.
I agree wholeheartedly with this change. I welcome it. I can assure you that. My concern only for this change is a course like the Corners Basic Course, with the staff changes on a regular basis, that the individual who is in charge of training changes, and the staff opposed that changes sometimes. A course like that is a mandate that we have to have in the first year for the deputy coroner to be eligible to do their job. And having that course be held up because of that is the only concern I would have. Other than that, I welcome it 100% wholeheartedly. And again, with staff changes, people rotating in and out of the need for training and a lack of material, as you mentioned, is what I'm afraid of, especially the first time that we need to do the big changeover if there is any need for it.
Doctor? Yeah, doesn't the quality assurance program take that into consideration when evaluators come out? Because several of my classes have been evaluated. They pull the expanded course outline and they essentially, say, hey, you know what, it needs to be tuned up, or it needs to be, it's not consistent. You can hit them out of sequence, or, say you teach it 1 hour, not, it may be flip-flopped around just because of the flow of the class. But isn't that taken care of during the quality assurance evaluations that are being done?
Well, yes and no. Again, I hate to have somewhat wishy-washy responses, but each case is unique in that the quality assurance program cannot catch every single course that we are presenting. There are a number of reasons that a course might be requested to have a quality assurance review. It could also be just the random sampling of the course where a course is being reviewed by the quality assurance team. And so this would, in essence, ensure that every course within a 2-year period would be reviewed and updated and modified. And also, this process is only looking at the course content, the outline, the hourly distribution, the instructor resumes, that sort of thing. Whereas the quality assurance program is really designed to look at the course holistically, not only the outline and the instructor qualifications on paper, but also observing what's happening in the classroom, the instructional methodology, the delivery, and making sure everything is aligned, and that the best practices are being utilized in the classroom.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that.
Thank you for that. Committee, any comments, concerns, questions?
My only concern is similar to yours, because I know that I, in the past, had a class that was held up because there was a changing of guard of the regional consultants. But I think we're doing pretty well with the regional consultants now, and people are in place. And I think it'll probably move a lot quicker than it did back when I had that issue.
Thank you. Any other comments? Hearing none, may I get a vote? Thumbs up, thumbs down on this matter? Excellent. Thank you, everybody. Mr. Loggins?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Our final voting report is going to be presented by Bureau Chief Mike Radford from the Training Program Services Bureau. And I'm going to ask him to provide a report on an amendment or proposed amendment to Regulation 1005 regarding minimum standards for training.
Good afternoon. So yes, this will be an amendment to Regulation 1005 regarding minimum standards for training that requires every full-time peace officer promoted, appointed, or transferred to a first-level supervisory position. And it states that they all shall complete a certified supervisory course. It also requires every full-time peace officer promoted, appointed, or transferred to a middle management position shall complete a certified management course. So current regulation does not specifically state the required supervisory course or management course need to be post-certified, which does not match the intent of the regulation. Non-specificity of post-certification risk regulation interpretation for peace officers to attend a course with content that may not be satisfied by post requirements. So the proposed changes to the regulation would be to clarify the supervisory and management course must be post-certified.
Thank you for that report. Any questions or comments, committee? That's a pretty straightforward one. Hearing none.
Sure, just a real quick question. Making those mandatory being post-certified now, is post going to add more classes so that there's not a backlog?
We will do everything we can to make sure that we can put together and present as many supervisory or management courses to meet the need. We also recognize that during the most recent suspension, that there's going to be a big backlog. So we're working very hard to actually add more supervisory instructors to try to put as many courses out there to try to keep those backlogs down and to make sure everyone makes all of their required training within the specified timeline.
Thank you.
Sheriff, Mr. Chair, if I may add to the question by Sheriff DiBasilio, please let us know. That is a question we have heard in the past, specifically from one sheriff's office that had a number of sergeants that had to go through the supervisory course. I believe it was like 38. They said, we can't get them in fast enough. We do have a number of those courses out there, but we also know that it can be a challenge. Please let us know. If there are opportunities to bring it to the region and get them all done, or we can't get them all done, obviously, and take everybody offline, so to speak, from regular work, we will do that. So we do recognize that at times there are challenges to get everybody in within that 1-year time period. Please let us know.
Thank you, Mr. Alvarez. Committee, any further comments or questions? Okay, hearing none. Can I get a thumbs up or thumbs down vote for this one? Excellent. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Sheriff. With your permission, there is one report that is actually itemized in the consent section of our agenda, but we do think it's noteworthy enough that we would like to bring it to this body's, bring it to their attention so they can review it and give their input for later guidance to the commission. And I'm going to invite Bureau Chief Roseanne Ritchell to the podium, and she's going to discuss the report on officer wellness video, specifically regarding the Did You Know videos. Well, I just found it's going to be Mike Barnes instead, so come on down.
Good afternoon. I'm honored to be with you today and provide a pre-release viewing of our upcoming video, focusing on one aspect of officer wellness. This video is part of the Did You Know series, which usually focuses just on one topic in a very direct manner. In this under 5-minute video, we will address the one wellness subtopic that you'll see shortly and have entitled the program, Did You Know Silent No More? This video was developed over the last year in conjunction with our very capable vendor, along with some extremely talented assistant or people who assisted us from the law enforcement and mental health profession. I'm compelled to provide a preparatory comment for those of you who have not seen this yet, since several others before you who have viewed draft versions were caught unaware that the content is very direct and can easily revive past relational or personal experiences. With that, please enjoy post Did You Know Silent No More.
$213 King, 1020. $213 King, what's your 20? Can I get units to respond to 1700 block of Forest Hill?
213 King, foot pursuit northbound, 1700 Forest Hill.
213 King, copy. Foot pursuit northbound 1700 Forest Hill.
He's right there.
Continue to 1700 Forest Hill.
211 John, copy. 214 John, I'm 1097. Give me your hands. Code 4, one suspect in custody. Give me your hands. Right. You all right? Yeah. All right, I'm okay. I'm good. All right.
Another foot pursuit?
Yep, another 1016.
Unbelievable.
Hey, you paying those guys to let you catch them?
Marshall. Nice work.
Still got it. If I wasn't handling your pip work, that would have been my chase.
Andy would have gotten away.
not what I want to be talking about today.
You all right? Hey, man. You all right?
Next week, we'll release this video and follow it 1 week later with a full-length training video on the topic of officer wellness, which is eligible for CPT and explores various facets of this topic from many perspectives, including those of new officers to veteran staff and leading even to retirees. Both of these programs are components of a greater campaign to assist agencies, officers, staff, and families with the many aspects of wellness and resiliency. We will be launching a new webpage in conjunction with the first video to provide resources and contacts for agencies developing or enhancing their own programs. Before introducing Andrew to detail other larger aspects of this effort, I'd be glad to answer any questions or take comments related to the video.
Committee, any questions or comments?
Just wanted to comment that was amazing. That really got my attention. Looks like we might be in line for another Emmy.
That was very well done.
Good work. It's powerful. Thank you.
Very talented people involved with making that and suggesting the ways it was produced. So it was definitely a team effort. Great, looking forward to that. And along with any Emmys, we really hope that it is lifesaver and family savers as well. I think that's going to be the great reward. So with that, I'd like to introduce Senior Law Enforcement Andrew Mendonza, who is leading the overall efforts within POST as related to wellness and resiliency.
Good afternoon. In March of this year, several staff members began identifying the need for a coordinated response to both officer and organizational wellness. This group sought to use existing and planned resources, the video is one of them, combined with a needs analysis to determine how best to serve the field. From these initial meetings, POST formed the Wellness Collaborative. A key component of this collaborative will be the formation of an advisory committee. This committee will conduct reviews of best practices, make recommendations for wellness-related resources, and review individual, organizational, and program practices to determine applicability to California law enforcement. The committee will also be tasked with assisting POST in determining needs and identifying gaps in the current and proposed wellness programs that support agencies. POST has set the following goals and objectives. POST will act as a platform to disseminate essential information to our law enforcement partners via web pages, bulletins, targeted emails, and the infusion of wellness concepts into current and future courses at all levels of professional development. POST will also facilitate course development and content through subject-related development workshops. And finally, POST will promote organizational wellness through education and advocacy. POST intends to use existing platforms and programs to highlight the importance of wellness and to give agencies the necessary resources, tools, and support to develop their own wellness programs. That's all I have formally, but I'm happy to answer any questions from the group.
Thank you for that report. And I gotta, again, say the video was amazing. Being in the line, I am at the coroner's office, we see death all the time, and it got my attention. And I know in the times that we have right now, it's perfect timing to help all our officers out. We appreciate that. Thank you for everything you guys are doing there. Committee,
Mr. Chair, if I may interject again. So we have a bulletin that's going out to the field either today or tomorrow. It should be released, but what we've started to do is with that video, we've talked to the major law enforcement associations and asked them if they will show that video, perhaps coupled with a message from the chief or the sheriff, whether it's on an email or a video message, however they communicate internally, and show that video at roll call, wherever it may be on a specific day. That day would be June 24th, if I'm not mistaken, according to the bulletin. So the associations have all seen that. It could come from PORAC or one of the others, but we're not necessarily trying to get branding for posts, but we're just trying to get that message out there to start that dialogue. That bulletin also indicates that the 2-hour wellness video training course will be released on July 1st, if I am not mistaken. So we want to get the message out as much as possible and try to get as many people as possible that may need to hear that message to hear it.
Thank you for that. Committee, any other questions or comments?
I just want to thank you. I can't tell you, I know just from my own agency that they're going through a lot. We were, scheduled to dedicate a baseball field this Friday. It was apparently vandalized over the weekend. The monument itself, or at least the dedication thing, and with what's going on the last month, I think, with all agencies and sheriff's departments, the rioting, the looting, the confrontations, something like that's probably it's just perfect timing. And sad to say that you would have to have that, but it's perfect timing.
Thank you.
I forgot to add also, we are reaching out, the regional consultants are reaching out to the training managers across the region. We have the links to that video. You can't see the video, but we already know what the links are, and we're providing that. I believe they're listed on the bulletin, or at least listed, it'll be on our website. In case you start hearing from training managers that we're communicating the same message, trying to hit the mark on June 24th with that video. Thank you.
Thank
Very
you.
well, thank you, Andrew. Thank you, Mike. Mr. Chair, I yield back to you. That concludes staff's presentation of the agenda items.
Thank you very much for all those presentations. Committee, this brings us to the arena of our committee reports. I'm gonna ask that we go around the room, and if you have anything to share for the good of the cause, or we can pass to the commission, I ask that you share them now.
I'd like to go. Kathy
Please.
Oborn. Hi, Kathy Oborn with KG. I'm sure Post obviously knows about this, but since the state chancellor for the California Community Colleges came out and said that we need to reform our curriculum in our community college academies, as well as our criminal justice programs, we were waiting with bated breath to figure out what that's going to look like. They talked about some oversight, review of courses. This, of course, is a domino effect for us because not so much, well, the academies as well, we answer to a higher level when it comes to improving our courses at the state level, the chancellor's office. And this also affects a lot of the programs that transfer to CSUs in the UC. So I'm hoping to hear something by next week about what's going to happen, because I know many programs are, out of the 114 colleges, are just hanging on, waiting to find out how this might add another layer of something on top of their program and their training, rewriting of course outlines, and it's really a kind of a ginormous mess at this moment. So I will know more later.
And Ms. Oborn, I can report from post perspective. We reached out to the chancellor's office, and I'm happy to report that we are starting a dialogue with the upper echelon of the chancellor's office. So I believe we have a meeting scheduled sometime next week, but we're looking at it as an opportunity to move forward, collaborate, and make sure the training that we provide across the entirety of the state of California is the best it can be.
Right. I knew you guys were in on it. And again, we're also asking about the non-post, non-academies. How's that affecting? And we've not heard anything yet. And that's a huge monster to tackle.
Thank you for that.
Welcome.
Anybody else?
Mr. Chair, if I could add, we skipped over presentations, but I will leave it in your hands. I presume if you've elected to combine presentations and reports, we'll just leave it be.
I do appreciate that, Mr. Loggins. I did skip it by mistake. I'm sorry.
Okay, and if I may indulge, Mr. Chair, the member Honda was unable to make it to the meeting today. So on behalf of CPOA, he sent a report and asked that I read it into the record. So if I may do so.
Please do so.
This is from CPOA. He says the CPOA has created the LEADS program to be a resource for leadership and officer wellness during this pandemic. It's a collaborative forum for exchanging ideas, best practices, and answering questions during the COVID-19 pandemic. The pandemic has presented unprecedented challenges for many industries, and public safety has not been immune. LEADS are facilitator-led Zoom conversations designed to allow people to connect with peers, virtually discuss the changing environment, exchange ideas, and most importantly, support the physical and mental well-being of you as first responders. He also addressed concerns and requests from the board, and he states, the pandemic has created unprecedented issues for ongoing training, and it is important for the law enforcement profession to have access to flexible training platforms. The difficulty obtaining post credits for non-live recorded webinars has been a concern. Many courses can be multiple hours over several days, and live webinars are not practical. The request would be to grant credit for non-live webinars. Can Post approve more courses that can be delivered via platforms such as Zoom, MS Teams, etc., such as that as going on in the Post FTO school? Students could get homework assignments, links to videos, or do mock DORs for homework and discuss with the class the following day. For those that don't know, DOR is a daily observation report in the field training program. Regarding enhancements for post-online continuing education courses, some vendors require students to listen and write down keywords embedded within the video presentation to receive credit. Others have a timing mechanism embedded that permits the student to take the class where they left off so they can re-engage within a set time period, such as 48 to 72 hours, so the lesson does not grow stale. And finally, he says the CPOA would like to thank Post, the commission, and fellow advisory members for the dedication during this time of national unrest and uncertainty. The CPOA is committed to working with all of you to better the California law enforcement profession, making it a standard for the rest of the nation to follow. And that is the end of Mr. Honda's statements on behalf of CPOA. Switching to on behalf of Post, I can address his concerns or CPOA's concerns with request to the non-live and recorded webinars. We've actually scheduled a meeting with CPOA leadership to discuss those concerns in person. We're very cognizant of the fact that we're in either a new normal or a new abnormal with the COVID crisis, and we will make every possible effort to be flexible in our training platform so it can meet the training of law enforcement across the entirety of the state, while also ensuring there is a built-in mechanism to ensure that their learning is actually being conveyed in these online platforms. And with that, I yield back to you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Loggins. Any other reports?
I just wanted to let you all know that even though I geographically relocated with my new job, I will still be representing CAPTO and being affiliated with them. And slightly related to that, we're talking about the supervisory course, and I'm still going to be instructing that through Fresno Police Academy, and we're going to be doing the new bifurcated week course, presenting it here in Crescent City, coming up the first week in July and the second week in August. And that's still planned. We're limiting to a maximum of 15 students due to health concerns to be able to separate people enough for a face-to-face course. And we're pretty excited about being able to pilot this new bifurcated course program.
Thank you, sir. Any other comments? Reports?
Mr. Chair, this is Jamie Young. Just one report that for those of you that may not have heard, AB 1945, which is an emergency worker definition bill, establishes public safety dispatchers as emergency workers. Passed the Appropriations Committee last week on a 76-0 vote and has to the Senate. So we're real excited about that. And although there's not a schedule yet for that hearing, it'll go to the Rules Committee. We're very excited that it actually has gone this far. So just an update on that, and thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Any other reports? Okay, hearing none, I'll take a minute and briefly say that I know COVID has affected all of us. I know it has affected our department, the Orange County Sheriff's Department. It's been a tough time, but we are pushing forward with recruitment. And I know for all of you that are in law enforcement, especially smaller and bigger agencies obviously vary, but in a bigger agency, you know, we're facing some budget shortfalls, and they're talking about furloughs all of a sudden, and part-time work and voluntary and involuntary furloughs at the same time. But I think overall, law enforcement staying positive, and with the assistance of posts and videos like that, it reminds us that we're human, and hopefully going live like this on a stream, allowing everyone to see us, it's a big deal and allows everyone to take part in the growth of law enforcement as a whole, if you will. I know that it's been a while, and I'm going to put this out on the agenda because not that it's something new, but I know it's been some time that we had the opportunity to vote on the positions, whether our committee is going to be here or not at the end of the year. But I think it's time to vote on the new chair and vice chair positions. If I may, Mr. Loggins, I don't know if that's appropriate at this point to run that through the committee or our team here and decide if that's something we can do.
Well, it's a two-part answer. This is your committee, sir. Having said that, I would suggest yielding to the guidance of the direction the commission gives tomorrow. Having said that, this is your meeting and your committee. I believe it would be best to maybe see what guidance and direction the full commission provides us with tomorrow.
Okay, we'll go with that. I'm hearing no more reports, so we can go back to presentations. Ms. Loggins, any presentations we have for us today?
No presentations from Post.
Thank you, sir. Any comments from our commissioners in attendance? Hearing none, if we go to old business, Mr. Loggins?
Yes, under old business, even though the composition of this committee is in limbo until the commission gives us direction, there are several reappointments that the commission will review, and they are as follows: Elmo Banning, Alex Bernard, Randy Waltz, you, sir, Arden Barron, as well as Jamie Young. And the commission will be reviewing those in addition to making a determination what direction this board will be going.
Thank you for that. And new business, sir.
With respect to new business, there are two requests to join the advisory committee. And at the last meeting in February, the commission asked that this body provide any input if they had any on these two particular individuals. So I will ask if any of the members of the advisory committee have input for Mr. Eduardo Esquivel, who actually attended one of the commission meetings a few sessions ago, as well as Mr. Kenneth Fitch, who has requested to join the advisory committee.
If I may start, I know Kenneth Fitch personally. He was in my MICC, or Master Instructor Course Certification program. And not only he is an amazing instructor, but if you read his letter, I wouldn't do justice to him by trying to even come close to explaining his experience, expertise, job knowledge. He's a Sergeant Los Angeles Sheriff's Department, and he's done a lot more than being just a deputy sheriff. He's an amazing individual. If I had my opportunity, I would obviously put both hands and feet in and recommend that he join our committee. But any comments or questions or concerns, or if anyone else in the committee knows him?
Mr. Chair, I do have a question. It's Jamie Young. Is this for open seats that are 2 open seats, or is it 2 candidates for 1 seat, or what is the filling aspect there?
Ms. Young, at this point, I would have a hard time answering that question, only because we're gonna wait and see what the direction the commission takes tomorrow, and further from that point on. I wouldn't have an answer for you. Whatever answer I give you may be totally different come tomorrow. So at this point, I'm gonna say, I do not know. I apologize.
And the chair has it correct. Both of these letters came in prior to the direction the commission gave in February. So the answer is yes, no, and maybe. So all we ask as post staff is that you provide any input if you on any of these individuals, if they were to be taken under consideration by the commission for any position that they would be eligible for.
Mr. Chair, Jason Salazar. I would comment on Fitch. I reviewed that letter, and I think, again, depending on where the commission goes with this committee tomorrow, would support that. My question would be based on even the review that we talked about with regards to the advisory committee earlier, and some of those positions being repurposed, if you will. The letter from Mr. Esquivel is with regards to a public member. It looks like the public member position was repurposed to a post-private presenter. And then the other 3 contemporary law enforcement peace officers. So I don't know that it would fit that if that was the adoption that the commission did take to continue the advisory committee tomorrow.
Thank you for that. Any other comments?
Randy Waltz, I would recommend that we defer any recommendations for these until after the commission decides whether they will adopt the recommendation. And then we talked in a previous meeting about soliciting candidates for these positions. And I think it's important that we do, regardless of the qualifications that we have in the current request, that we do solicit other applicants in some manner, whether on the post website or pushing it out to agencies so that we can fill all of those positions.
Thank you for that. With that, any other comments? Okay. Hearing none, we'll go to future meetings. If we're all here together, upcoming meetings will be October 21, 22nd in Post at West Sacramento, February 24th, 25th, Pasadena, California, June 2nd and 3rd in West Sacramento, and October 21st in West Sacramento again, hopefully.
Thank you. If I may add, Mr. Chair, for the time being, we are projecting that we will have in-person commission meetings for the time being.
We like that. If there's no other comments, concerns, or needs, we're going to go ahead and adjourn this meeting. Thank you, everybody. Meeting adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.